Hello, students. You're welcome to today's lesson on punctuation marks and their functions. I am Mayowa Adeyemo with the brand name English with RMG, and this video is proudly brought to you by IOTA Virtual Learning Platform. In this video, you are going to learn all you need to know about punctuation marks for you to become an excellent writer so that you can write effectively and pass across the exact meaning you intend to pass to your reader and excel excellently in all your written English examinations. So, are you ready to learn with me today? Stay tuned, get your writing materials, and let's begin. So, this is the second part of this series on punctuation marks. In the previous series, we discussed the full stop and the question mark. If you would like to watch that first, you could go to the description below to click on the link. Remember that we said that punctuation marks are generally divided into two, and they are the end marks and the internal marks. The end marks are three, and we already discussed two of it in the previous video, which are the full stop and the question mark. So now let's continue from where we left off, which is the exclamation mark. So, what is an exclamation mark and why do we need to even use it in our writing? Or, what kind of meaning do we use the exclamation mark to communicate in writing? So, the exclamation mark is used to express strong emotions such as surprise, joy, anger, shock, indignation, fear, etc. So, in a nutshell, when you're trying to express any form of emotion at all, then you use your exclamation mark to show these emotions, whether it is a positive emotion or a negative emotion. As I've said earlier, when we speak, you can use your hand, your facial expression, the tone of your voice to show different kind of emotions about whatever it is that you are saying. You can say the same expression and it will mean different things just based on the way you've said it or your facial expression or gestures while saying it. But when you write, you do not have this opportunity, but you have your punctuation marks to also accentuate this meaning on these letters or words that you have used. So that is why we have the exclamation mark to help us show that, oh, this is not a flat declarative sentence, nor is it a question. It is a what? An emotional statement. So let's look at a few examples. We have example 1. Oh no, the house is on fire. Look at the way I've said it. I didn't say, oh no, the house is on fire. No, that would be a normal statement. So, but when somebody shouts out of fear or panic, there is a form of what? Emotion in that. So when you write a kind of sentence like that, make sure that you use the exclamation mark, not a full stop, so that you can show that this is a sentence of what? Of emotion, not just an ordinary statement. Do you understand? Example 2, we have, I'm getting married. You can imagine that you have a group of friends and one of them is just trying to tell the others that, oh, I'm getting married. You know how these things are. You don't just say, I'm getting married, like a flat statement. This person is going to say it with so much joy. Do you understand? So these are kind of emotions that you use your punctuation mark, the exclamation mark to do what? To communicate. So it's going to be, I'm getting married. Immediately you use the exclamation mark. Your reader will be able to read it with the same meaning and it will even help them to imagine the scenario better. So example 3, we have, how dare you speak to me like that? So that's a statement of what? Anger. Do you understand? So it's not how dare you speak to me like that. That's going to be a declarative statement. But when it is how dare you speak to me like that, you use your words exclamation mark. So the way you are imagining that meaning in your mind, you can actually use your exclamation mark or any punctuation mark that fits it to communicate it. Do you understand? So example 4, we have, what a beautiful sunset. So this is a kind of admiration. Like maybe you are out in one evening on a beautiful beach and you saw the beautiful sunset. You say, oh, What a beautiful sunset. So it is not just what a beautiful sunset. So any form of emotions, statements that are not just ordinary, that are coming from the emotional state of the speaker, remember to use your what? Exclamation mark. Example 5. I'm so thrilled to see you. Joy or excitement. Do you understand? People say things like this, and this tone of their voice help them to communicate how they feel about what they are saying better. So it is not just limited to flat statement that does not even evoke any kind of emotion or feelings on the part of the listener or the reader. So now let's look at a practical example of how we can use this exclamation mark in our write-up. So we are going to use a question from WAEC 2020 section A, question 2. It reads, write an article suitable for publication in a national newspaper on the topic, the importance of promoting good reading habits in students. When it comes to writing, examination, you are usually at liberty with the kind of story you come up with to answer your question. However, let's see what I have here. So I have, as educators and parents, we often overlook the simplest yet most effective tool for unlocking students' potential, reading. Now look at the way I read that reading. I read it reading because I saw the exclamation mark there. Do you understand? And I intentionally put it there because I also want my reader to read it as reading, not just for lucky student potential reading. No. So when you are trying to communicate deeper emotional expression like this, use your exclamation mark. So let's continue. What better way to broaden horizons, spark imagination, and foster critical thinking than through the pages of a good book? So this is a question mark and an exclamation mark. That is, I'm asking some kind of rhetorical question with some kind of emphasis. Do you understand about the way I feel on the topic that I'm writing about? So when you use the exclamation mark, you are able to communicate deeper meaning of emotions. Again, students don't often use this exclamation mark. You rarely see students use it in their write-up. So when you use it in your write-up, it will give your reader or your examiner a kind of impression that yes, you're a good user of the English language. Not just do you have a good command of English vocabulary, you also know how to use your punctuation marks effectively. And this can actually fetch you more mark because your examiner is going to have positive impression about you generally. So now let's look at another example from WAEC 2020, section A, question 5. It reads, write a story that ends with a statement, I had never felt so embarrassed in my life. So this is a story about an embarrassing situation that happens. So let's see how I can write my story and also use my exclamation mark to communicate emotions. So I have, as I walked into the school cafeteria, I tripped on the slippery floor and my tray went flying. So when I say went flying, you can imagine that it is not just a flat statement. All of these emotions, all of these tone that we use in writing, in speaking, to communicate the meanings, we can also communicate it in what? In writing through our punctuation. So I have my lunch splattered everywhere. Spaghetti sauce stained the tables, chairs, and even the principal's suit. So when I say the principal suit, you can imagine that I'm actually shining my eyes, trying to show the emphasis of how embarrassing that moment can actually be for me. Do you understand? The entire student body gasped in unison and I froze. To make matters worse, one of the students burst out laughing and shouted, nice move, Clumsy. The humiliation was overwhelming. Now look at the way I've read this essay. I didn't just read it like a normal, I'm reading a newspaper. No, because I have the punctuation marks that are guiding me to actually express the emotions that are behind the words that this person has written down. So, and that is why the most important thing you need to know about punctuation marks is that they help us to accentuate meaning in our write-up. That's why it is essential, it is crucial for all students to know their punctuation marks and know their functions each. Are you following? So you can imagine that nice move, clumsy. You can actually imagine the facial expression on whoever student that have said it just because of the right punctuation marks that I have used. Even when I said that my spaghetti sauce stained the principal's suit, right now I'm actually shining my eyes to show that, oh, you can imagine how embarrassing it might actually be or how scared I must have felt in that moment. And when I also say the humiliation was overwhelming. So when you use these punctuation marks correctly, you as a reader or I as a reader will be able to read the write-up with the right meaning. Do you understand? So now we've come to the end of the end marks. We've discussed the full stop, the question mark, and the exclamation mark. So I hope you can use these three punctuation marks effectively now. If you have other question about any of it, you can put it in the comment section. I will be there to answer your questions. And I would also appreciate it if you can put down one or two examples in the comments below. Are you following? Also, remember that when you use any of these end marks, you have terminated that sentence. It means that is the end of that sentence. You are going to start with a fresh, new sentence. So now, after discussing the end marks, let's move on to the internal marks. That is, the punctuation marks that when you use them, you continue writing, whatever it is that you're writing in that sentence. And we are going to begin with the comma. So what is the comma and what kind of meaning do we use it to communicate in writing? So the comma is used in writing to indicate a slight pause in a sentence or a speech. The comma is about the most commonly used punctuation mark after the full stop. So you would rarely see a full paragraph without a comma. That is, it is that common. It is the most commonly used punctuation after the full stop. So now let's consider the functions of the comma. Why do we need to use it in our write-up? So function 1, we have to separate items in a list of words or word groups. That is, it is not just one word. No, sometimes we could separate word groups as well with what? The comma. So what do I mean by this? Let's consider a few examples. So example 1, we have Mom bought me a new wristwatch, a pair of leather shoes, textbooks and notebooks, a new lunchbox, and a set of pen against next week resumption. So here we have word groups. A new wristwatch, that's a phrase. A pair of leather shoes, that's another phrase. Textbooks and notebooks, another phrase. A new lunchbox, another phrase. So we can actually use the comma to separate what? Word groups in a list. Are you following? So the list, the item does not necessarily need to be just one word. No. So example 2, we have about rice, beans, eggs, bread, and other groceries from the neighborhood store. So in this second example, we have one word each in our list. Rice, just one word. Beans, another one word. Do you understand? So it could also be one word each. Example 3, I have my brother and I usually clean the house, do the dishes, wash our clothes, and do our assignments every weekend. So here we have clean the house. That's a clause. I hope you can differentiate between a clause and a phrase. Anyways, this lesson is not about clauses and phrases, so let's just move on. Clean the house, do the dishes are examples of what? Clauses. So you can also separate it with what? Clauses. So function 2, we have to separate two or more adjectives qualifying the same noun. So let's look at an example. We have my class teacher is clever, active, intelligent, and lovely. So all of these adjectives are a list in a series to qualify one person. So we also use the comma to separate these different adjectives that are qualifying one person. Do you understand? So another example of this is Africa is a large, multi-religious, and ethnically diverse continent. That is, It might not just be only one person. Do you understand? Once it is a list of adjective qualifying one noun, we know we have different types of noun. Personal nouns are referred to people, places, etc. Do you understand? So the comma can also be used to separate phrases or clauses. So this is part of the examples I gave earlier. But I also want to lay emphasis on the fact that comma does not just separate one word. It can actually separate group of words. And this group of words could be phrases or clauses. Do you understand? So for example, let's look at this. We have, when I got out of bed that morning, I observed my prayers, brushed my teeth, had my bath, took my breakfast, and headed to work. So this is like a series of events. Do you understand? So you can also use the comma to separate series of events or clauses like this in a sentence or a speech. Are you following? So you would realize that this example is quite different from the ones I gave earlier in our first function example. Are you following? So can you give me an example like this in the comment? Just for me to know that you're following and you truly understand what I'm saying. So example 4, we have to separate a tag question from the rest of the sentence. So I want to believe that you know what the tag question is. You know those statements that we have. You can drive the new car, can't he? You can talk right now, can't you? Or you can't talk right now, can you? Those are our tag questions. So we have, he can drive the new car, comma, can't he? So when you write tag sentences like this, make sure that you separate the sentence from the tag with the what? A comma. So this is another function of the comma. So you don't just write it without any punctuation in between. Example 2, we have, he didn't arrive early, did he? So the first one is a positive statement with a negative tag. The second one now is a negative statement with a what? A positive tag. So whichever it is, make sure you separate it with a comma. So function number 5, we have before or after a short quotation after the usage of said. So before we say that somebody has said something, when we quote directly in writing our sentences, for example, we have, stay out of trouble, mom said. So after quoting what that person has said, you need to also separate it with a comma before you say what that person has what said. Do you understand? Because if you look at the way we say it too when we talk, there's usually a little pause in between. So that little pause in between, you need to indicate it with a what? With the comma. So example 2, we have, he smiled and said, you've got no problem. So this is another example. You can see that before that, after the said, we have a comma before we say what that person has said. So example 6, we have to set off introductory elements in a sentence or paragraph. So I really want you to pay attention here. Example 1, we have, above all, you need to give it your best. So above all is an introductory element in a sentence. However, where I want to really lay emphasis here is the introductory element in a paragraph. Because usually some students just write their whole full essay about 6, 5, 7 paragraphs, and there is no introductory element at all. So introductory elements are essential for your write-ups because it helps you to transit naturally from one paragraph to the other. So what am I trying to say? Let's exemplify it by considering a question from WAEC 2018, section A, question 5. We have, write a story to illustrate the saying, a bird in hand is worth two in the bush. So this is a question. Let's see how I'm able to answer it using the introductory element and the comma. So this is the beginning of the essay. In a small village nestled between two great forests, there lived a young hunter named Kofi. Kofi was known for his exceptional hunting skills, and his family relied on him for their daily meals. One day, while out hunting, Kofi spotted a plump rabbit nibbling on some juicy berries. He carefully aimed his arrow and was about to release it when he saw two larger rabbits grazing in the distance. So this is the first paragraph. Usually, the first paragraph does not often need an introductory element. But once you are moving from one paragraph to the other, that is when once you want to go to the second paragraph, you would need an introductory element. However, comma, so that's our introductory element. You see, is essential for you to transit effectively from one paragraph to the other. And when you use this introductory element, make sure that you put a comma beside it before you continue whatever it is that you want to say in that paragraph. So we have, however, comma, Kofi's greed got the better of him, and he thought to himself, why settle for one small rabbit when I can catch two bigger ones? He lowered his arrow and began to stalk the larger rabbit, but the rabbit suddenly sensed danger and darted away into the thick underbush. Meanwhile, comma. So you can see that as I'm going to another paragraph, I also have another word, introductory element with my comma. The small rabbit Kofi initially spotted had grown wary and also fled, leaving him with nothing. Kofi realized too late. So the emphasis here is, I just want you to understand the transition from one paragraph to the other. It is essential because I've seen students write from the beginning to the end, no introductory element, no transitioning devices. Do you understand? Like, however, meanwhile, like this. Do you understand? So he realized that he had made a grave mistake. He had let his desire for more cloud his judgment, and now he had nothing to show for it. So let's say I want to continue. Moreover, comma, that's another introductory element. For another words, another paragraph. So it is essential to understand how to use these introductory elements. There are lots of them. And what you are going to use depends on how the next paragraph you are writing relates to the previous paragraph you have written. Sometimes the next paragraph is just another thing that is in agreement with what you have said earlier. So if it's in agreement with what you have said earlier, you can use moreover, meanwhile. Do you understand? In addition. Do you understand? So, but when it is quite different from what you have said earlier, maybe you said something that is A, now you want to say something that is B, that is quite different, then you can have conversely. Do you understand? Or maybe what you have said is now as a result, what you want to say now is as a result of what you've said earlier. Then you can have consequently, as a result, therefore, etc. Do you understand? So now, function 7, we have of the comma, we have to separate items in the address to a letter and after the salutation of an informal letter. So we also use the comma when we write our address, sometimes in formal letter, sometimes in informal letter. However, in informal letter, when after writing your salutation, dear brother, dear father, dear uncle, or dear friend, make sure you always put your comma beside it, because sometimes students will just write dear whatever and they won't write a comma, they just go to the essay. That's a mistake that could cost you your mark. You could see the way I've used the comma in the address example as well. 10 Adam Street, comma, Oshin, bus stop, Lagos State. Do you understand? So I would also like you to note this. Yes, the function of a comma are quite many. As you can see, we've discussed 7 functions. However, do not use it without a purpose. You can read your write-up aloud for you to confirm if the comma is actually needed for meaning clarification before using it. You know, the whole essence of punctuation is to communicate meaning. So don't just use comma haphazardly just because you are, oh, comma has lots of functions. This might lead to comma splices. That is, you are just separating the comma, separating your words unnecessarily. It is not all slight pauses that requires a comma. Do you understand? So if you are confused whether to use it or not to use it, read your sentence aloud and be sure that this pause is actually significant enough for you to use a comma to indicate it in your write-up before you use it. Do you understand? So that you don't end up making a grave mistake. So, do you have any question? Whether it is about the comma, which is the first internal mark that we've discussed, or from the previous one that we've discussed, or any question at all about the English language for your WAEC or any other examination that you're preparing for. If you have any question, do not hesitate to put it in the comment section. In fact, if you are just confused about something or you need more clarification about something, do not hesitate to let me know. Again, if you are yet to like and subscribe, kindly do so now. This is English with RMG, and I am Mayowa Adeyemo. This video is proudly brought to you by IOTA Virtual Learning Platform. So if you have learned anything, kindly share with your friends and family.